Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the Center for Financial Security for our webinar today, Moving the Needle on Retirement Planning and Saving, the Role of Education. My name is Hallie Leinhardt, and I'm the Outreach Specialist for the Center for Financial Security here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We'll begin our webinar today with an overview of the study and presentation of findings. We'll then welcome discussants from the Wisconsin Department of Employee Trust Funds to speak about their Empower program. Next, we will welcome a discussant from the National Endowment for Financial Education to share insights. And then there will be some time at the end for audience questions and answers. So please feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. I'm very excited to introduce our presenters for today's webinar. We have Carly Urban, who's Assistant Professor of Economics at the Montana State University. She's also a Research Fellow at the Center for Financial Security here at UW-Madison. Tarna Hunter is Director of Strategic Engagement and Government Relations at the Wisconsin Department of Employee Trust Funds. And Shelley Schuler is also joining us from the Wisconsin Department of Employee Trust Funds, and she's the Deferred Compensation Director. And finally, Billy Hensley is the Senior Director of Education for the National Endowment for Financial Education, is also an adjunct professor of education and human development at the University of Louisville. Thank you all for being here today. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Carly.
Great, thank you, Hallie. So thank you so much for listening in, and I'm really excited to talk about this project. This is something that Michael Collins and I have been working on since like 2010, I want to say. But we're really excited to actually have the study out and published, and really excited to talk about the findings, because I think that they are extremely important and really kind of contribute to our understanding of workplace financial education and retirement planning kind of in a different capacity. Okay? So the basic motivation is thinking about modern financial planning and how it's dominated by one topic in particular, which is retirement savings and retirement planning. Right? So we know that workers now are responsible for their own retirement planning, which is starkly different from the past, where we had defined benefit pensions, and this relied more on employers than workers themselves, and we have seen that decline, right? So workers actually have a lot more responsibility now to save for their own retirement. But at the same time, retirement saving rates remain extremely low. So according to a recent survey by the Employment Benefit Research Institute, 1 in 4 workers has less than $1,000 in retirement savings, and less than half of private sector workers that are working age, so between 25 and 64, participate in retirement savings. So the big question is, why are so few people participating in retirement savings, and can some of this be attributed to a lack of information generating these very low savings rates? Okay. So there have been a lot of policy responses to kind of mitigate this low retirement savings with the thought that the government safety net will have to kind of kick something in if people are not saving enough on their own. The first big policy response we've seen are default options. So basically, instead of opting into a retirement plan through your employer, you opt out. And we know that that does increase participation, but it's really hard to say if all borrowers benefit the same. So you could think that low-income borrowers might have less ability to really save for retirement right away. They might have different preferences over whether or not they participate in these employer-based programs, and there should be differences across individuals, right? Borrowers have very different preferences on their retirement savings, and simply kind of nudging them to save more might not be the right answer. Another policy response that we've seen is employer matching contributions. So the employer specifically has a percentage that they match, but take-up of this is still actually extremely low, which is somewhat of a puzzle that people are not really using this quote-unquote free money. And again, kind of alludes to the fact that maybe there's some information problem there. Another policy response are tax breaks. So there's tax advantages for qualified plans. Usually these are in the form of a retirement savings plan, usually IRAs. But at the same time, these are costly for the government, and take-up is actually still pretty low among low and middle income individuals, and it's more high income individuals that are actually making use of these plans. Okay? So again, what we're trying to get at is increasing information, so a different policy response that's more centered around education and knowledge in the workplace, increase retirement savings. Okay? So what we did was a field study, and within this workplace financial education course, there was 10 hours of an online course in 45 different credit unions. Okay, so 10 hours, not that intensive, but enough time for employees to really sit down and work out the material. Most of them finished the course in less than 10 hours. But the basic topics were thinking about finance, investing, financial planning, retirement saving, different strategies for your goals, mutual funds, saving for college, understanding investment risks, working with financial advisors, and just how to operationally get started. Another kind of highlight I want to talk about with respect to this education is that the fact that it was online is actually quite important because it lets different employees really focus on the topics that might be most relevant for that person, as well as spending more time on things that maybe are sensitive topics that they might not steer a classroom type environment towards covering. Okay. One other thing to point out is that this was done with the credit unions, and individuals could actually do it during work. So they're not actually doing this on their own in additional time. They are doing it while they're still in the office. Okay, so given those kind of 10 topics that are covered in the course, we think that there are really three kind of big mechanisms through which information in workplace financial education can shift savings behavior. So first, we expect that this will actually just allow people to focus more on retirement planning. So just signaling that it's extremely important might allow these, especially younger employees, to just pay some more attention to it, right? So that might make them actually use a budget or a spending plan, and again, might actually increase retirement savings, especially for those younger individuals. It might also help people to limit their consumption in order to allocate some of their income towards savings, so that if they were making that budget, you might limit some of your consumption, and you think that maybe this retirement savings is more important, and you know more about how it works. Finally, you might actually get some information about non-employer-based accounts, so an IRA versus your employer-sponsored 401k, and you might have more information there. So you might be able to set up more accounts on your own. Okay. So what we did is a field study. Now, it's really hard to do a field study in these types of situations because you don't want to randomize and allow some people to get the treatment and have the education and have other people just be completely left out and worse off. Right? But you really want to evaluate the outcomes and make sure you do have this random assignment so that people, so you can actually see what happens due to the education, right? Not just because some people are different. Okay. So what we did is we randomized at the credit union level. So some of the credit unions got the education, and they got it in October to December of 2009. Okay, so the first group we're going to call the treatment group, but in order to kind of maintain this equity, the control group actually eventually gets the treatment. So everyone eventually gets the education, but we're using this difference in timing to really kind of understand what the causal effects of the education are. So there's really three periods that are of interest. The first for the study is the baseline. So in September of 2009, there's an initial survey where everyone's filling out the survey in both the treatment and the control groups, right? And then in October to December, the fall cohort gets the treatment, right? They get the education. They have access to the education. We had really high take-up, over 90%, but that doesn't mean everyone had to do it, right? They just had to have the offer of education or an intent to treat measure. So then the last period was the follow-up. So the second survey was in January of 2010. So we're going to compare outcomes in that follow-up period across the treatment and control group And again, we can call this the control group because as of January 2010, they haven't gotten any education, but they do get it in the next month. Okay, so that's really important for our study, I think, in terms of both equity and measurement. All right, so in order to really say that the treatment and the control group look similar, what we want to do is understand what the differences in the samples look like at the baseline. So again, flipping back quick, this is the initial survey in September of 2009. Okay, and people look relatively similar. If you do a full formal test of all of these, the only one that kind of shows up is that the control group has slightly higher income, but it's not really, we don't think that that's a big motivating factor, and accounting for that doesn't really change any of our results. So to kind of talk through what the sample looks like, a lot of these individuals have children, so under 18. So over 70% of the sample. Most of them are homeowners. Only about a third to a fourth are college educated. And most of these individuals are white, non-minorities. And 80% of the sample are females. And I think that's really important in this study. Again, these are credit union employees. So we're not thinking of, the highest level people at the credit union who are maybe giving financial advice. These are mostly bank tellers and similar kind of occupations. The average age is about 40, though we do have a high percentage of, if you do the full breakdown, a lot of these are younger individuals. They're not people who are that close to retirement age. And average income is between $45,000 and $50,000. Okay, so not too low, but not extremely high. So just to kind of show you the differences in sample composition at the baseline across the control and the treatment, in the variables we're going to be looking at as our outcomes, about half of people have an IRA, and these are self-reported. About 40% of people say that they make a budget, and about 75 to 80% say that they are using their employer's benefits, meaning their health benefits, and other benefits provided, so life insurance, things like that. And then 3 months of saving, we're trying to see if people have 3 months of saved for an emergency. So do you have this kind of buffer emergency savings? And about half of people do. Okay. So the specific survey questions are centered around financial knowledge and financial behaviors. So for financial knowledge, we're asking people their self-assessed knowledge on credit scores and credit files, retirement investing, interest rates and loans, and then stocks and bonds. And then in terms of financial behaviors, the big ones that we're really interested in is having an IRA, retirement savings or investment account, savings and investment account. Do you have a weekly or monthly spending plan or budget? Right? So we think budgeting is really important for retirement planning, as well as actually reporting that you have a retirement savings plan. Okay? And then we're also going to be looking at administrative data on retirement savings amounts. So I'll get to that in a little bit. Okay? So this is just the survey questions, all self-assessed. Right? And again, we ask these in the beginning as well as the end, as well as after that first group received the treatment. Okay? So I'm going to walk you through the results of what we're finding on knowledge and then what we're finding on behaviors. Okay. So first, we're finding if we just look across the treatment and the control groups in that post period, right, assuming that these are completely randomly assigned, credit scores see a 5%, knowledge of credit scores see a 5% increase, and interest rates a 4% increase, right? So these are percentage point increases from your knowledge gains. And in terms of stocks and bonds, that's where we see the biggest knowledge improvement, and as well as investing. So the education is improving knowledge, at least self-assessed knowledge across all of these groups. But if you remember, if we're thinking about stocks and bonds, that self-reported knowledge was the lowest to start with. So we're thinking about average effects, and this is a 25% increase from the mean effect. Okay. Now, in addition to that, we are seeing that the education actually changes behavior as well. So the big finding here is that IRA participation is increasing, so by 12%, and we are also seeing that people are more likely to make a budget. So they're participating more in their retirement plans, and they're making a budget. Okay, and this is a quick turnaround effect based on when the education happened and what happened afterwards. Okay. How quickly they're responding. In terms of other outcomes, it's kind of weird that on the counter it says 16 out of 15, if anyone's following along. So the education didn't really change anything, any of the other outcomes that we surveyed. So there's no different change in automobile savings, in education savings, or paying late fees. Okay, so people aren't, saving more for retirement and then paying late fees. A lot of these people maybe already were saving for education for their children or for themselves, and maybe that didn't change, and no other kind of earmarked budgeting. Okay, so now in addition to that survey information, we also have employer retirement account contributions. So basically what we're doing here is we're getting administrative data from a subset of these credit unions, looking at their retirement savings accounts and comparing the treatment and the control groups, again, in the post period. We find that education increased monthly savings by about $26 on average, which is modest, but non-trivial, right? So that's kind of the amount that we might expect these individuals to be able to respond to on that margin. So if this amount was maintained for roughly 10 years and we assumed a 3% rate of return, so somewhat modest, this could actually be $4,200 in added retirement savings just from this workplace financial education that costs the employee 10 hours of their time, up to 10 hours of their time. Most of them took less than 10 hours. And the cost of the program is actually pretty low. So it's $10 per employee plus whatever work lost, assuming that they have no kind of like strong distaste for the education that's really negatively affecting the employee in some other way. Okay. All right, so the basic takeaways I think from this are to think about workplace financial education, improving financial knowledge. And again, I showed you the self-reported financial knowledge, but we actually see test score-based financial knowledge improvements as well. People are more likely to use retirement accounts. So we see a 6 percentage point increase from a baseline of 52%. They're more likely to make a budget. So again, we see a 6 percentage point increase on a baseline of 42%. And we see an increased employer-sponsored monthly contribution. So we see this $26 increase in contributions, and that's consistent with potentially changing your defaults and really thinking about it, because every individual isn't changing the same way, right? There are heterogeneous responses across individuals, but the average effect is roughly $26. Okay. And the final thing that I kind of want to be the takeaway from this is that these are not just kind of any employees with low financial literacy. These are employees that are working in the financial industry, right? So they might not be the ones that are the most financially literate, but they're still in that industry and surrounded by it. And education in this setting has the potential to influence financial behaviors positively, especially in terms of retirement savings. So if it works for this group, that might be already a little bit more advanced than some of the general population, we think that this might actually be a lower bound to what might be found in a more general population. Okay? And I think that is my, great. Thank you for listening in. Here's my contact information in case you need anything. And I will turn it over to Tarna.
Thank you, Carly. And we'd like to thank the UW Center for Financial Security for allowing us the opportunity to be a part of today's webinar. Financial literacy, retirement planning, and education are all topics that are very important to Shelley and I. We work for the Wisconsin Department of Employee Trust Funds, and you may not all be familiar with that, but we administer the retirement benefits for state and local public employers. We have about 600,000 inactive and retirees that have benefits in our system, and we administer both a defined benefit plan and a defined contribution or 457D plan, which is the Wisconsin Deferred Compensation Program, which Shelley's the director of. In 2015, we developed the Empower campaign.
This campaign was really developed and implemented to encourage women to save more for retirement. Shelley had done some work with the Center for Financial Security in 2009 studying women's retirement in the public sector in Wisconsin and found out that they saved at a lesser rate than men, but was unable to take the second part of that, which was because it was a Social Security grant, which was to allow them to actually put together an educational campaign. So I learned about this study when I started working and was interested more in the plight of women and how they were faring in the Wisconsin Deferred Compensation Program, the Wisconsin Defined Benefit, which is the Wisconsin retirement system. And some of the issues that are unique to women is that, and why they save less, is that they live longer. They live on average 3 to 4 years longer than men. In Wisconsin retirement system, we're happy because I think that that gap is narrowing, so men are happy that they're starting to live as long as women. Women also earn less. In the United States, women earn about 78 cents on the dollar. They take more time away from work, and a lot of this has to do with caregiving responsibilities. Women are more likely to take care of children in the beginning of their career, and they're more likely to take care of elderly parents in the end of their career. So this leads to more part-time work, which leads to less wages, less Social Security, and less savings. And then they often end up, because they live longer, living alone in retirement, which has higher likelihood of being in a nursing home. I think nursing homes have about 76 to 80% of their occupancy are women, which ends up costing a lot more money. When we looked at the Wisconsin retirement system, because we were interested, okay, so what does it look like for a defined benefit plan? You can see here it's 2009 to 2014. Women on average, their pensions are about $500 less than men, or about 20%. This also coincides with the Wisconsin Deferred Compensation Program. Women's account balances for the Wisconsin Deferred Compensation Program are about 20% less also. So we knew that women were not saving as much as men, and it goes back to the fact that they actually make less than men, and they are more likely to work part-time. But we knew that we could try to help women and educate them to increase that savings in the beginning of their career to reduce the likelihood that they're going to end up in poverty. So the Empower campaign was a grassroots effort. So we're a public agency, and we don't have a lot of money. So Shelley and I knew that we kind of had to think outside of the box. And at this time, I was part of the statewide Affirmative Action Committee, and every large state agency, which is about 30, I think a little over 30 larger state agencies, statutorily has to have an Affirmative Action Committee, and they have monthly meetings, and then they need to report to DOA. And so Shelley and I thought, well, why not use the Affirmative Action Committee, because one of their goals is to create equality, equity for women, and trying to get them to partner with Wisconsin Department of Employee Trust Funds to be able to do a grassroots campaign. So Shelley and I basically did a little presentation at the statewide Affirmative Action Committee meeting and asked for volunteers. We only wanted agencies that were committed to actually implementing these campaigns in their agencies. And then we went out and we found a number of partners. Our partners were extremely important. They consisted of subject matter experts. UW Summit Credit Union was an extremely important partner. The Women's Institute for Secure Economic Retirement, which is the premier women's retirement and financial literacy nonprofit organization in the country, was extremely helpful. We had the Wisconsin Deferred Compensation Program was a partner, and the Wisconsin Women's Council. So there were quite a few partners. Oh, there we go, sorry. Quite a few partners that came together, and we started having monthly meetings. We also had the ETF Communication Office partner with us to help us develop the branding and some of the posters, the videos, all of the messaging we did. And we branded this group the Empower Team. And we sent out surveys, so we had 10 agencies that signed up to be part of our year-long campaign. We sent out surveys to the participating agencies to give to their employees to see what they were interested in, and then put together a marketing plan and tools. And some of the desired information they were interested in was they wanted more information on retirement. They wanted to learn how to save more for emergencies. learn more about investing, learn more about the Wisconsin retirement system, and learn more about Social Security. So of those top 5, 4 of them are related to retirement, and the way they wanted their information was short informational emails with links, short videos, and in-person training. So we used this information to actually craft that year-long campaign. So the Empower campaign, we had a website, and on that website was an agency toolkit, which I will show you in a few minutes, which is really the cornerstone of our campaign. We did a number of presentations and webinars, and this is where our all of our partners were extremely helpful. The Summit Credit Union did quite a few webinars and in-person presentations, actually budget workshops with our members, and the information that we got back from our members on those presentations and budget workshops were that they were extremely helpful, and then when were they going to get their second one. We also, and you can see the branding on this, did a year-long posters, brochures, and articles. And all of those posters, brochures, and articles related to specific information that was important to women. Things had to do with caregiving, how to save for college for your children. If you're single, certain things that you need to look at differently. We also did the benefit and wellness fair. So whenever there were quite a few benefit and wellness fairs, and wellness programs are taking off in Wisconsin, so we're able to partner with a number of agencies and then the overall state wellness program to try to bring the Empower campaign to as many places as we wanted. And the whole idea with that was nudges. We wanted people to see our message in lots of different ways, through posters, through videos, through these emails. See us at the benefit fair. We had brochures that were going out. And after a while, over that year, that people are going to be like, oh, the Empower campaign, what is that? Or they call me like, oh yeah, I saw that Empower campaign. Or, oh, I got your blog for the Empower campaign. And then ETF implemented its first Twitter account, and we used the Empower campaign to actually introduce Twitter for ETF throughout the state. And then we partnered with a financial fitness group for a financial fitness checkup, which is something we're still involved in, but it is a 10-minute checkup that people can gauge how financially fit they are. And we had a number of videos. So on April 23rd, we had the Empower kickoff. And I always like to, Shelley and I were like, we felt like we were throwing a huge party and had no idea if anybody has come. ETF had never done anything like this before. And I think my heart was beating really fast because I was just waiting for people to come in the room being like, oh, I hope somebody shows up. The room was packed. There was standing room only, and women were standing outside the door. We had the Wisconsin Deferred Compensation Program there handing out information and signing up people for one-on-one sessions. And the Wisconsin Deferred Compensation during this program had more one-on-one sessions in that period of time than they ever had before in the history of the program. And this is a benefits fair picture. And then this is the Empower campaign website. You saw that before. Right there, you can see that down there's some blogs. We had different ethnicities and different ages and women going through different, and it actually corresponded to things that were going on during that time of the year, like, oh, children are going back to school. How much, is school costing this year? What are some ways to save money? And then this is the agency toolkit, and we kind of consider this the cornerstone of this campaign. And if you can see up here, we have June, May, April. What we did was we put together emails for each one of the weeks that corresponded to whatever our messages were, and then the videos, and the agencies could come on there, just cut and paste, and then it was very easy for them to implement these campaigns. Now I'm going to turn it over to Shelley to talk about the lessons we learned.
Thanks, Tarna. I'm really pleased to be here to talk with you today also about what we learned from this campaign. Tarna gave you a really good overview of what we did throughout the campaign and how we just kind of were able to get some momentum going because we had some people who were invested in moving this message forward. Tarna and I would just say there are a couple things that we learned out of this. One is you really have to have dedicated resources. If you don't have somebody that can manipulate the website or is willing to write the email messages so that that's out there for people to pick up and take forward, it won't happen. Invested partners is key. As she mentioned earlier, Wiser and Summit Credit Union really helped bring credibility to us and help explain some of the basics for people who are looking for things like budgeting. Peer-to-peer is still really important. A lot of what we have learned from this is that it's really good to have the information out there, but the action gets taken when somebody talks to their neighbor, their coworker, etc., and they start talking about it and deciding they want to do something. Customizing messages was really good as far as keeping on topic for what was going on within the year. We worked with April to send out information about National Financial Literacy Month. In October, we talked about National Retirement Security Week and the multiple nudges. We just kept trying to find people different methods that they could get the information so they'd see it enough to finally take action. Because we know that people don't just suddenly decide to take action. It's something that they build up over time and finally decide they need to do something about it. And then I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about the measurement. We were delighted to be able to partner with the Center for Financial Security to actually look at the data. As Tarna mentioned, we had about 10 agencies that did the intervention, took ownership of the campaign and moved it forward to their employees. And then we had another 10 or 12 agencies that we used as our control group for people who were not getting those messages in the different methods. And so the UW looked at the overall activities we had going on, and they are looking for us at what campaign methods resulted in the largest increase as far as people enrolling or making changes to their WDC accounts or making additional contributions to their WRS accounts. And those are key for us because Employee Trust Funds has that administrative data for both of those, so we're able to look at the change and actually measure it. So this has been the exciting part for us, is that as this chart shows, there was a change in how people are contributing to their WDC accounts. The top two lines on here, the blue and the green ones, are the non-Empower agencies, and the bottom two are the Empower agencies. So if you focus on those bottom two, the red line are male contributions to the WDC, and the kind of gold-colored line are the women. And you can see that as of December and January 2016, those lines are pretty much identical. So we've had roughly a 10% increase in what women are saving in the WDC as a post-tax contributions as a result of the Empower campaign nudges. Another way to look at that is this slide that shows the gap between what's going on with the agencies that did not have the Empower program and the ones that did. And you can see again that our decline goes with that red line showing that the gap between men and women's post-contribution rates to the WDC have decreased. Here's our contact information if you want to talk to us some more about what we have out there with the campaign, or if you want to, borrow some of the stuff that's out there, we'd be willing to share it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Billy.
Thank you, everyone. This has been a great presentation so far. I've learned a lot about not only your work in Wisconsin, which is fascinating, but this research study. Really quickly, for those of you who do not know anything about NEFI or the National Endowment for Financial Education, NEFI is the acronym that we use to when we talk about ourselves. We are a private operating foundation. We have a national focus of our work. We're headquartered in Denver, Colorado, but you will see one of us at pretty much any financial literacy, financial education endeavor, conference, research event, all across the country. And we were formed after the sale of the College for Financial Planning, and so that is really what informed our mission early on, and it continues to be part of what we do. And because of that sale, we are able to operate off of our endowment. So we don't raise money, we don't accept federal or corporate donations, and we do that because we want to be as autonomous and neutral in the field as possible, and so that we can provide these non-commercial resources to educators, intermediaries, and directly to learners and consumers. And the way we do that is threefold, and that is through education, through awareness, and through research. And the lines get very blurred between these three areas, and that is very intentional because research informs everything we do, and everything we do we put out to the public so that they can learn and benefit from that, whether that be through media or educational endeavors, and then the feedback we get from that loops back and then informs additional research. And so it's an endless cycle at NEFI in the way we do our work. And so what's fascinating to me about this study and about the initiatives that are going on in Wisconsin is that, you know, NEFI drew a line in the sand a few years ago, and we made a pretty firm stance in our work that you can't call what you do financial education unless it includes key factors, and we have identified 5 of those key factors, and you can find those on the NEFI website and at nefi.org. And, you know, we've learned a lot of that through feedback we've gotten over the years, whether that be from educators, whether that be from research that we've funded. But it all came to this focused point of discussion about 4 years ago where we said, you know, a lot of things that people call financial education are simply not educational. And from that, we got together and we said 5 things have to be present. Number 1, a well-trained educator and or a well-designed e-learning protocol that is built upon the principles of strong educational tactics. Number 2, vetted materials. Number 3, relevant information to the audience, and that in and of itself is not a very easy thing to do. You have to truly consider who you're serving, and I know that the previous folks who have talked about this today get that and understand that, and you can see that the outcomes of that in their work. Timely instruction, as well as evaluated impact and evaluated work. And what's great about what I've seen here today is that is what exactly they have done. That is exactly what they designed in these interventions, and that is exactly how they measured it. And that's, you know, as an educator, that's exciting. As a person who works to fund thought-provoking research in the field, seminal research in the field, that's exciting. But at the end of the day, when NEFI is creating and providing educational materials and talking about best practices in the field, this is exactly what we mean when we say effective financial education. And that's encouraging. Now, when Carly started her discussion, she said that, you know, she hypothesized about this lack of information. Well, information is our life at NEFI. You know, we work constantly on refining and getting out good information to as many stakeholders as possible. And this sense of the benefits of workplace financial education, we've been asked this question so many times over the years. Does it matter? And what's working in the workplace? And, you know, a few years ago, we didn't really know much about how to do this well in the workplace. You know, we had ideas and notions about this, and we funded some studies that actually had built some best practices on this. And what we have found and what we heard from the field is that while it's an excellent opportunity to have this captive audience, the barrier tended to be capacity of the institution itself or the organization in their human resources. And I don't mean just the human resources office. I mean the capacity of the facility or the organization or the office to be able to execute something like this in the workplace. Those barriers seem to be falling based on what we hear out in the field, based on the feedback we get. More and more employers are starting to value this workplace-based education when it comes to personal finances. And I even heard a person who works for SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, say in a meeting last spring that more and more employers are approaching them about how do they do this. And so that's very encouraging. But I would also, as we are thinking about how to talk about this and disseminate this kind of work, is to be able to be prepared for the discussion of how to overcome the barriers to doing this in the workplace. Another thing that I really like about this work is that the opportunities for this sense of continued lifelong learning, that's something at NEFI that we espouse in all that we do, that financial education is not this one and done, do it once and you're done forever experience. It's like all of education. In order to become and stay proficient, you have to re-engage. And so to espouse this sense of lifelong learning, whether that be these refresher courses, or as at NEFI we kind of jokingly are calling those inoculations, where you go back and you get those touch-ups to information, and as well as the sense of, taking advantage of the captive audience. It's we have that with high school instruction, we have that with college instruction, but for the most part, for adults, we don't have as many opportunities to have this sense of a captive audience to learn something. And so what's great about this work is that we have willing parties to use the captive audience. And this sense of, we talk about opting out of the 401k or retirement benefits. I would advocate that people should have to opt out of workplace financial education. Now, I don't know how realistic that is right now, but hopefully we get to the point where that's the conversation we're having, where employees are saying, no, I don't want that information, and it's they have to opt out instead of, saying, oh, I would like to participate in that. A couple other points I would like to make about this and why it's important, and how we see the world at NEFI from sort of this 40,000-foot view of where everything connects, whether that be research, education, or awareness to the topic. And this sense of action-based learning, where the user is learning and making decisions simultaneously. I've talked about action research in the past, but what's great about this is where you're not just throwing information at a learner, but the learner is building the information as they're hearing it, and they're creating this sense of ownership in what they're doing, and things are decision-based. They're decision-focused. And, the direct benefit to the employer, and from now on when people ask me about this, not only am I going to point them toward the study, I'm going to be able to say to them that the ROI on this is phenomenal. Number one, because, it's 10 hours for $10. That's $1 an hour. I don't think there's any other thing that you could get out of some kind of professional development or workplace investment in the employee that's $1 an hour. And so you've got this 10 hours of well-designed education, and think about what that means financially. In this sense of, we saw some of the dollar benefit, this $26. Think about this 12% increase, this 15% increase in retirement, and what that means financially throughout a person's life and what that will turn into. And being able to put a dollar amount to that, I think, makes it real for employers, and that's great about this study, and I'm very excited about that. The other thing that I would say to you before I end my comments is that financial education, we are learning more and more every day about how to do it well and how to build on success. And as we continue to see high-quality studies like this, it encourages those who are out in the field doing the work to have a path to follow that's very clear, and thinking about the kinds of financial education and what those things do. And it's, when you've got this captive audience for a short amount of time, and you can tie what they're doing to this walk-away plan or this action-based intervention, you're able to see an immediate change. While longer-term things may not change, we're hoping that longer-term financial education in schools and throughout life can actually play into some of the things that these shorter-term financial education interventions aren't doing, and we're seeing that in different ways. So thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to turning this back over to Hallie and hearing what some of your questions are for the team.
Thank you so much, Billy. Thank you to everyone who just presented, Carly and Tarna and Shelley. And now we do have some questions coming in from our audience. And the first one I'm going to direct to Carly. This is mainly a clarification question. Would you mind touching back on and going back over the difference between the treatment group versus the control group?
So obviously there's a lot of differences in the treatment and the control group. I think the timing is really how we got at a treatment and control group, and I tried to kind of highlight that. But basically what we have is a setup where everyone is surveyed at the baseline period, and then I think half the group, half the credit unions, these are all in Wisconsin, which I did not mention before, stupidly. But these are all credit unions in Wisconsin. Half of them get the treatment in that winter, and then we follow up again in December. So then the rest of the the rest of the credit unions eventually get the treatment, but they are still our control group. All the people within that credit union serve as a control group, as they weren't offered any education at that time period. Does that clarify?
Yeah, I think that is very good. I have a question that I'm going to direct to Tarna to begin with, but Shelley, feel free to weigh in, and then Billy and Carly as well. So, Tarna, you had mentioned that the Empower participants requested short information. That seemed to be the most valuable or requested type of information that people asked for or had an appetite for. In your experience, does this format provide enough detail, and is it able to give people comprehensive enough understanding of the topic?
So the way we designed our short informational emails were that they had links to other topics that would go into a little bit more detail. Everything on the Empower website was sort of building on. It's like trying to engage somebody to get them to pay attention first versus throwing a really long brief at them. They weren't at that position where they were going to read the brief, but if they would read a paragraph and they'd be like, oh, that actually does resonate with me, or oh, it applies to me and I should find more information. And then that goes into what Billy was talking about. That's where the verified, reputable information from a subject matter expert that's actually vetted that information was made available. And we found that we gave, our survey had a number of different ways of getting information, and some of them were like sending out research reports, stuff like that that would have, I think, a broader scope of what the information was. And people said they don't have enough time for that. They're at their desks and they may have a minute or two, and that minute or two is kind of what we felt was our opportunity to actually pique that interest, that they'll go back, they'll go to our website, they'll find out more information, which is what we found out actually happened from some of the, I guess, some of the feedback we got. Do you want to add anything to that, Shelley?
Right. I think Tarna hit on it with as far as what could we do to make it easier for people to take that next step. So a lot of the emails were would come back at the end and they would close with something that would send them to, here's the phone number to call the WDC if you want to make a change in your account, or here's the WRS section where you could make that additional contribution. So really piquing their interest and then giving them a very, very easy way to go take the action was what we were trying to focus on. Billy?
Yeah, for me, I think just considering the obstacles that the employers as well as the employees have to face in order to fully participate, and being able to address those or have answers to those before you even start the program is really important. So keeping that always as part of your strategy, because as you know, NEPI, we've done these focus groups over the years with HR professionals. We actually have a few scheduled tonight, coincidentally. And that's one of the things we hear is this sense of time, and is always a barrier. So thinking through how can we be creative about doing that and addressing that as a removal to as a removal of the obstacle to participate.
Yeah, and I will chime in a little bit about timing. We did have the 10 different modules, but it seemed like it was very different across individuals as to how much time they were spending on each. So a lot of them were looking at retirement savings, but there are some topics that some individuals just barely touched on, maybe less than an hour, well under an hour, let's say, for the 10-hour time period. So it's a lot easier to focus on what you're interested in when you have that module that's flexible in online education platforms. And I think that wasn't something we necessarily expected going in, but we actually saw a lot of variation across individuals in terms of what they preferred to spend their time on.
Oh, thanks to you all for answering that so well. Next question. This one is directed towards Tarna and Shelley again. And this is referring back to the study you had mentioned in your presentation, which involved Michael Collins. And the question is, did Michael tease out the difference in impact between people who only received emails versus emails plus counseling or workshops? So this person basically is wondering if increased engagement equals increased impact or not.
So that's a really good question, and the answer is we don't know yet. student that is working on this, I believe, that's a work in progress. The data that we shared with you initially was what we had gotten out of the first pass through the data. Our hope is that we're able to sift down to that level, but we're still waiting to find out on that.
Yeah, I think as with anything, when we get this information back from the agencies, a higher level, I don't know if we'll be able to go down that, I guess, to that scope.
Right. But I think we did have, for example, different webinars and lunchtime presentations that have a specific date. So that was data that also went back to UW. So we might be able to see some of that, but the emails, I think you're right, Tarna, would be very hard to tease out.
And I can just chime in and say that I just received some feedback from Drew Anderson, who is a researcher on that project, and he's actually saying that they're actually working on teasing out those effects. So more to come on that.
All right. Thank you, Drew.
Thanks, Drew. I have a question for Billy, and this is perhaps a little off topic, but not really. And this is regarding, I think when you were speaking during your time about targeting certain audiences and really how to work with these different groups differently. What is a key or something that you can share in getting the 18 to 22, so these young adults age group, excited about learning personal finances?
Well, my answer, I'm asked this question or a question like this a lot, and the answer is going to sound a little flippant, but I don't mean it to be, so please don't take it that way. But quite frankly, we just need to ask people what it is they need. And part of that is going to them, going to where young people are working or are in school and asking them how they want to consume this information, what topics are important to them. And, we've done a little bit of that at NEFI. Well, not a little. We've done a lot of that at NEFI. And for a website that we have that focuses on this specific age group, it's a little broader. It's sort of this 18 to late 20s. And we actually took cameras to the street and started asking people these questions. And they want something that they can relate to. They want to hear a story that they can relate to. They want to see things that have happened to others or be able to have that personal connection, whether that be through videos, whether that be through blogs. And that is a good on-ramp, we think, for getting a deeper level of engagement. It's not always about shiny games and so forth. It's about quality information that's in small chunks that are easy to digest. You don't want to cram a mutual fund strategy down someone's throat the first time you have a conference with them about financial planning or thinking about the future, but this sense of how having some extra money saved helps them out of a rough spot. And then when they're able to relate to those stories and those examples, and I've seen this in focus groups that we've conducted, I've seen it through more formalized interviews that we've done, and then just kind of taking a camera out to the street, that people really want that sense of connection so that they can feel like that they're not the only person or they're not alone in this journey. And then from that point, you create these short interventions that help people think through tips, for example. What are these quick tips or rules of thumb when I'm thinking through a particular idea, getting my first apartment, for example. And then that builds this sense of, to steal the words of a colleague of mine, Brent Neiser, it builds this on-ramp so that hopefully that people can start to formulate this sense of lifelong learning and come back for more as they're making different kinds of decisions.
Thanks, Billy. Does anybody else have a comment to add to that, maybe some insights? Okay, otherwise I have a question directed to Carly. So you had mentioned in your presentation that this particular audience actually does have some financial awareness, just being that they are employees of this credit union. Are there any plans in the future to expand this study with perhaps less financially aware or familiar populations?
Not at the moment. I think it's definitely important, and I think we would need to get some employers on board that are potentially in a different set. The hard thing in terms of implementation is that folks at credit unions are usually pretty proactive about this and really interested in doing this type of a study. That's not necessarily the case at other employers, unfortunately, but it would be great to link in into what Billy was talking about before with the Society for HR Management and maybe get a broader audience for something like this. I know that some companies have demand for this type of program, and other private sector employers have actually started using this program, this exact online platform, but I don't know that any of them are excited about evaluation.
Thanks, Carly. Just a quick question regarding the resources, or if the resources are available. Someone asked if whether the online education materials that were used or developed for this, for the credit union study, are still in use, and if they are accessible for people to see.
So I think it's the Wisconsin Credit Union League that sponsored the study, but the Real Progress and Pathways to Prosperity, the RP3 is what it's called, program, was developed by Precision Information LLC. So I believe contacting them would be the best way to get the material. We obviously have it from the fall of 2009, but I don't know if it's been updated since then. So it would be great to reach out to them directly. I know they do charge, so I don't know exactly if it's something we could fully just give out. But I think, yeah, contacting them would probably be the best way. It has been replicated in 13 different states in different ways. So it's out there, but I think that they have actually edited the curriculum since we used it in the fall of 2009.
Great, thank you. And I think I have time for one more question. Let me choose wisely. So this is about ongoing and continuing education. So once participants choose to participate in the retirement investment accounts, how do you then educate them and support their needs to manage their accounts to maximize their return? And I think that this question could probably go to any of you, but perhaps Billy, maybe you would want to take a shot at it.
Sure. I want to answer this in a way that's really helpful. I guess I could be, funny and say, well, just send them to NEFI's website, smartaboutmoney.org, but I will not be too trite about it. For me, thinking about retirement in the sense of, once you get folks in and they make that initial commitment, or they increase their retirement savings, and the topic begins to be demystified in general, and they understand things like, the costs associated with, funds that are managed, for example, or what is a target date fund? What does that actually mean to people? For me, I think once you start to pull away the layers of nervousness or obstacle to thinking about it, and for me, it's a lack of information, I think, for a lot of people, because they think, oh, well, that's, I'm not good at that, or I'm not a numbers person, or I'm not a money person. Once you start to show them what it actually is, and you take away the complicated jargon around it, people will self-select in a lot of times. But being able to have access to good tools and easy to understand information, I think, is imperative. And if you can point them toward those opportunities, whether those be online videos or courses or brochures that the benefits management company makes available, getting that to the folk. You're never going to have 100% proficiency with every person who learns something. Otherwise, every person who sat through an educational intervention in school would all make A+. But the sense of, as people become comfortable with it, I believe that they will engage more often in it. But they have to have access to good information as well as good products, to be frank.
Excellent. Anybody else want to weigh in? That was a really nice way of answering that kind of continued engagement question.
So this is Shelley. As the Deferred Compensation Director at ETF, I spend a lot of time trying to coordinate between what ETF is putting out for information and the information that comes out from deferred compensation. So with the Empower campaign, we were trying to really get those pieces to build upon each other. So if you saw something one place that talked about budgeting, maybe in another place you saw something else about budgeting that would lead you to a link that you could take advantage of. Maybe not as sharp on the education end as Billy would like, but we are making steps towards that. It's a goal for us.
Yeah, this is the first time that the Wisconsin Retirement System and the Wisconsin Deferred Compensation actually partnered together in trying to look at it in more of a holistic way of retirement savings. So it is baby steps, but we feel like we're making progress.
Can I add one more thing? Sorry, this is Billy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that we have found incredibly helpful at NEFI is user testing, and that simply means having the intended audience look at what you are creating and getting their feedback. And it's a simple idea on paper, but a couple of word changes can make a world of difference in if someone picks up something or not. And we have seen that directly with some of our websites. And I know it sounds simple and over, maybe too simplified, but it truly is a very powerful tool, is to just take it to who you want to benefit and say, can you give us feedback on this?
Great. Thank you so much, Billy, for adding to that conversation. And so now we are unfortunately out of time. We had so many great questions coming in. I thank the audience for listening in today. I'd also like to thank Carly, Tarna, Shelley, and Billy for your excellent presentations and contributions today to this webinar. And just a reminder to our audience, this webinar will be archived on the CFS website, cfs.wisc.edu. Within just a day or two, the PowerPoint will be posted as well. And please stay tuned for an email invitation coming up pretty quickly for our next webinar that will be scheduled for March 29th, and this will be on the topic of cultural competency, equity, and inclusion in financial coaching. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and have a great day.